So a lot of people obviously are living on the web and in the blogosphere, and they're connecting up with other businesses via the online tools, and that's fantastic. How important is it to be among the physical ecosystem on the ground in Silicon Valley, being 5 minutes from Facebook?
So I think you could do it without being there, so I wouldn't want to give the impression that any Kiwi doing a tech business should move to Silicon Valley, because that's hard to do. And a lot of our client base for our particular company is actually based over in New York. So I'm doing everything over the phone, and by email I haven't met any of them personally. So you can do it being based remotely, but I think in a relationship-driven business it just helps so much to see someone face-to-face. So perhaps if you're not based in Silicon Valley, you need to do what you've done, which is head over there for a few trips a year and actually meet some of these people that you've been communicating with, just because there's something to be said for meeting face-to-face and building a relationship. So I think you can do it otherwise, but we've certainly benefited from, even before we were lucky enough to become a finalist in the FB fund, we were back and forth with people at Facebook and building relationships, and that's every person you meet introduces you to someone else, and that certainly helps. So I know you went and spent a couple of months in Silicon Valley,
sure.
Is that right?
Yes.
That's probably a great way to do it, rather than just going over there and scheduling one meeting and spending a week and then flying back. If you can actually spend a bit of time, because, as I just said, one meeting leads to another meeting, which leads to another meeting, and if you've got a limited amount of time, you can't take advantage of that.
I also think that if you have a business that needs funding, it's almost a must to have at least an office in Silicon Valley, because it's so much easier to get funding in Silicon Valley than if you move already on the East Coast in the States. There's much less funding going on. And so I think it is quite important to be based in Silicon Valley if you need funding. So,
If we can just touch on funding quickly. So a lot of entrepreneurs are looking for funding across the board. Now it's a bit tighter in the capital markets on the whole. I think a lot of entrepreneurs sometimes think funding is going to answer their problems. Right? Now, listening to you guys, you're serial entrepreneurs, you've developed plenty of ventures. Were you leaning on this Facebook fund to solve your problems and make your business a success? It doesn't sound like that. And how have you really got here behind the scenes without that money?
Yeah, so we definitely, it would be foolish for us to have relied on the FB fund. So we had a plan B if we didn't win that money, and that's really just by keeping it really lean. We've kept our operation extremely lean, and we focused on only spending money where we absolutely have to spend money, which is on the development, because if we don't have a product, we don't have a business. But otherwise, we work from home. There's no fancy office at all. We use Skype to communicate. We've hired developers in countries where you get really good quality for less money than if you hire them in the US, let's say. We've just really kept the business lean and have managed to bootstrap it up until this point, and we could have continued. The other thing I think that's interesting for us is that we have a business model whereby once we get clients, we start getting money. So that gives us...
You mean you have a business model?
Yeah, we have a business model. Yeah, so we're not relying on, we're going to bring users in and in 3 years we might make money. I think that helps a lot in this environment. It would, both in terms of getting funding, but also just in terms of sustaining your business, because it just means we have a much shorter time where we need to support the business before it can help support itself.
So has every venture you've started worked? Have you had a couple of failures or things that haven't quite turned out, things that you've let die or let pass and just move on?
We had a number of sort of initial business ideas that just didn't. Once we wanted to start a restaurant and a few other crazy ideas, but I think we sort of in the initial phase we sit together and analyze it very rigorously, talk to a lot of potential users and customers, and sort of try to test the idea, and I think if you do that, you can sort of prevent going down the wrong path a lot in many cases. And so I think what we're trying to do is just to go out to the potential users and try to get feedback and see, is that really the right idea, or do I need to tweak it? And often you start off with one idea and you end up with a completely different concept. So I think that's important. an important lesson as an entrepreneur too.
So I think everyone kind of talks about in New Zealand, we don't have a good culture of failure, and obviously accepting that failure is actually pretty cool, you know, because if you can accept failure quickly, you move on to the next big thing, and you actually draw the strength from it. So is that, I mean, our US culture is a lot better. It's
Yeah, it
it's
is actually.
ingrained
That's a
in
good point.
communication.
Yeah.
Do you think that's something we have to kind of get our heads around a bit more? And I guess I'm hearing the advice right now, which I see a lot of Kiwi companies, a lot of startups who it hasn't quite worked out as planned. The capital was dried up. Their plan A was to raise some money after getting a bit of progress made. That plan is no longer going to work.
Yeah.
They're either going to go and hang their heads in their hands right now, or kind of get lean,
back on the horse
get back on the horse, and maybe try the next thing.
I mean, so I think that's an interesting point, and I definitely think in the United States, if you're an entrepreneur that had a failure, I think you're still extremely interesting to VC firms and investors, because they say that person's been there, they know what it's like to be an entrepreneur, they've learned lessons. Yeah. Who was it that, it was a really famous investor that said, we were at a presentation the other day, that said they actually would rather invest in entrepreneurs that had a failure the first time around, because if you have a success the first time around, you might think you really know what you're doing and that it's easy and that you have some special formula. And the fact is that everybody has a failure. It's really rare to find an entrepreneur that every business they've been involved in is successful. And I think that first business is where you really learn your lessons and you learn what it's like to be an entrepreneur. So I think you absolutely have to get back on the horse, and what you experienced the first time around is likely to make you much more likely to be successful the second time around, I think. The same token, there is something to be said for persevering, and I've seen a lot of people who like to think they're entrepreneurs, but they sort of just like the sexy, fun side of it, and the first big roadblock that they hit, it's too hard and they abandon ship, and if they'd persevered, they might have actually got to where they got. So there's some fine balance to be struck between sticking it out and really persevering with your idea, but not sticking with something that's just not working out. And I think, you know, I think you've probably done it, we've done it, the extent that you're experimenting with a few different things to really see which one's going to take off is probably a pretty safe way to just hedge your bets.
Hedge your bets.
Yeah.
Yep. Cool.
Yep.
Hey, look, thanks for coming on the show today, Victoria, Ellen. It's been great hearing about the story. We'd like to, obviously, we'll just keep in touch now, and we'll follow what you're doing and tell everybody what's happening back here in New Zealand as well.
That'd be great.
So I think it's been an inspirational story.
Thanks for doing what you're doing with the network. It's awesome.
Great. We'll be tracking you, and everyone will be hounding you and connecting with you soon, no doubt.
All right.
Thanks a lot.
Cool. No worries.
Cheers.